this stage, no restaurants were open, no pubs were open. The hotel we were staying in had no food. They didn't run food. So if you didn't get a takeaway, then our team wasn't eating that evening.
But how many people were there in total?
Well, I normally have about 6 with me. Whether it was 6 or not, I don't know. Usually when I'm travelling around the country, we have about 6 people.
And just to clarify, it was in Mary Foy's office, I assume, was it, in Durham?
It was in her constituency office.
In her constituency, indeed.
Yeah.
OK. So why is drinking within a constituency office in Durham during a working meeting permissible, while having drinks outside in the garden after a busy day or continued work is not permissible?
Well, Nick, if you look at that picture of the drinks outside at Downing Street, if I recall, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, the Prime Minister's on the terrace. I think he's got his wife and his left child with him.
Yes.
I'm not saying
Dominic Cummings is opposite.
I'm not saying you shouldn't have your wife and child at work, but it doesn't look like a work meeting. And if I recall, if you look further across the photograph, there's then trestle tables on the grass which have got bottles of wine on them. That is a million miles away from a takeaway in a constituency office between meetings.
And when Nadim Zahawi, I remind the listeners, who is a senior Conservative politician, points out that situations like that, the Prime Minister has apologised, you should at the very least apologise for the look that you have given. How would you respond to Nadim Zahawi and others for the look that has come across that you're drinking beer with colleagues at a time when others, as we know, were not able to say farewell to relatives, go to funerals, everything else?
Well, I think it's very straightforward. It was a very busy time. It was 3 days before or 3 or 4 days before the
Boris Johnson would say it was
elections.
a very busy time.
We were working in the office,
Boris Johnson would say
and a takeaway turned up, and
Boris
we stopped and we ate it. No, Nick,
won't apologise.
Honestly, two parties the night before Prince Philip's funeral with suitcases.
I think your point of a culture is very well made. I'm not suggesting a culture within you, but just for the look that it gave, Sir Keir, are you prepared to apologise?
Nick, we didn't break any rules. We were working in the office and we stopped for a takeaway. I understand what's going on here, which is exactly what happened with Owen Paterson and that. There comes a point at which the Tories try to take everybody into the gutter with them, and that's what's happening.
But just for the final, for the look of it, you're not prepared to apologise.
We did nothing wrong.
Okay, Jonathan, back to you. The final word on this, and then we must move on. Jonathan,
you've just couched it exactly. It's like listening to Boris Johnson without the harumphing. You have completely and utterly misled the country, just in your last statement. Because you don't need to have beer at a work gathering. Nobody else does. Nobody could go anywhere. Nobody could do anything. And you should apologise, and you are a hypocrite for not. And if you're going to throw stones at Boris, make sure that somebody can't throw them back at you, because you've done exactly the same thing.
We must move on. Final comment from you on this, Sir Keir.
Well, Jonathan, I just disagree with you. There's been industrial scale partying going on. The Prime Minister's changed his defence 3 times. I think we'll wait and see what Sue Gray has to say, but I suspect there's even more to come out yet.
Let's go to other matters. Jonathan, thank you. Margaret is in Poplar. Margaret, you're on the radio. Your questions for Sir Keir.
Hello, good morning.
Hello. Hi, Margaret.
Hello. We saw the 4 people who vandalised that statue and threw it in the harbour, found not guilty. But do you agree with me that they actually committed criminal damage, and that is what should have been that they were done for, criminal damage?
Yeah, I probably need to say that, of course, they weren't actually vandalised because they were accused of vandalising. I'd better be careful because, of course, they were, as you rightly say, the so-called Colston 4, cleared of all charges pertaining to criminal damage, despite police video and other things. Right decision, Sir Keir.
Look, I mean, if a jury come to a decision, I'm not going to undermine the jury. I think, Nick, it was on this programme, and the Monday after that happened, I was on for one of these Cool Kears, and we were talking about it. And I was very clear then, Margaret, that I thought that the way the statue had been brought down was wrong. I certainly agree that the statue shouldn't have been up there, by the way. I don't think we should have had a statue to Colston up there, but it shouldn't have been taken down in the way it was. But look, we have a criminal justice system. I ran part of that criminal justice system for 5 years. Our system is you put all of that before a jury, and they make their mind up. And I'm not going to undermine the jury on this.
You wouldn't seek to review that?
No, I wouldn't seek to review it. I stand by my own view at the time, though. It was the wrong way to bring this statue down.
Is there a disconnect between the judiciary, journalists respectfully, politicians, in that we take us to... You may be aware that some Extinction Rebellion protesters were cleared on the weekend. Were cleared on Friday, and the reporting was on the weekend. In one instance, they'd successfully held up a train. I wonder if the authorities, the police, the judiciary, the CPS, you, me, we see that as a potential crime. But the 12 men and women on an omnibus in Clapham, we're totally out of step with them. Sir Keir.
Well, that's the system we have, and it's a very good system.
Are we out of touch with them?
Well, I certainly don't think in the end we should let politicians decide who's guilty and not. And
No,
it's a tempting, or journalists. It's very tempting, and we do it all the time. I try not to stray into it, but it's inevitable that you do. But the system we've got is you put all the facts in front of 12 people who don't know the individuals concerned, and they come to their view. It's a very, very good system, and we should be proud of it.
Margaret, thank you for the call. Jay's in Barking. Jay, you're on the radio. Your question. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy New Year to both of you.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, Jay.
Happy New Year, sir.
Hello. Right, so given the information we know from Portugal and the US around reduced addiction and crime from legalised and decriminalised cannabis, my question to you, Keir, is why are you still insisting on treating people like me as criminals?
Jay, I have looked at many, many, many drug cases. When I was chief prosecutor for 5 years, I had, I don't know how many thousand drug cases come across my desk, and I saw the damage they do across our society. And I don't think we should change the law. Am I in favour of more, a health response as well? Yes, I am. Am I in favour of anything that helps people with addiction? Yes, I am. But I don't think that the answer is simply to decriminalise and say that drugs are no longer unlawful. I'm sorry, I disagree with you.
Jay, you must obviously allow to come back. Go ahead, sir.
Yep. The problem is it disproportionately affects the poor among society. So somebody like yourself, you can jump on a plane, go out to the US, go to the Netherlands, soon to be Germany, do it legally, come back into the country. Whereas your working class voters, the ones who choose between heating and food, you're effectively saying to them, we're going to prosecute you and our government is going to make your life harder. When you're only looking at the worst cases among society, there's plenty of people like me who's got similar sort of relationship to it as you would do with alcohol and use it in a very healthy manner.
But Jay,
the worst thing that can happen to me is you could prosecute me.
All right,
Jay, I hear what you say, but just hear me out. If you take, just one of the big issues at the moment, this county line drug running that's going on from London to various counties, that ends up in huge criminal offences. It ends up, it's personal to me. It ends up with dead youngsters on the streets of London, I'm afraid. That's where it ends up. And I've seen too many of those cases to simply say, let's just rip up the laws and have no drug laws. I'm sorry, I respect your view. I just disagree with it.
Jay, thank you. Very powerful point, but we've heard what Sir Keir says. You rightly referenced, Sir Keir, that last year was a tragic year in London. I don't need to tell you that there were 30 teenage, what are called homicides now in London. And possibly fuelled by that, the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, you've mentioned decriminalisation, is planning to pilot a project in 3 London boroughs that will see a very different way of dealing with people in a certain age group, 18 through 24, found in possession of small amounts of what are called soft drugs. Is that the way forward?
Well, I'll look at the pilot when it's finished. Of course I will. But in principle, I don't think we should change the drug laws. I mean, the police have always had a discretion, in relation to what they see on the streets. But I don't think changing the laws is the right way forward at the moment.
OK. You'd let the pilot go ahead, though. Isn't it rather dangerous? I think it's from memory, Bexley, Greenwich and Lewisham that this pilot starts and then presumably would have to be stopped if it doesn't work. Isn't that rather dangerous for the good people of those 3 boroughs?
Well, I don't know. I think, there are pilots of all sorts of schemes across the country, whether it's drugs or anything else. So I don't think we should just stop all pilots. I'll look carefully at the results, but I've had a pretty strong in-principle position on this for a very, very long time.
Are you in conflict with Mayor Khan over that?
No, not at all.
Okay. I'm not seeking to fight whether it's...
We've got lots of Labour mayors across the country. They have their own views.
Indeed.
That is a good thing. And I have a very, very good working relationship with Sadiq Khan.
All right. OK, let's go to another caller. John in Wathurst. John, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, John.
Good morning. May I say that I'm a 67-year-old old-fashioned Labour voter.
Oh, I love old-fashioned. If only I had more time with you, but I'll let you go on because I don't know what it means, but go ahead.
Oh, bless you. It's just I felt the party was taken away from me when Jeremy took over and momentum infected into the party. I watched you on Saturday at the Fabian. I loved the speech. You felt passionate and you were coming across really well. I watched Wes on TV, the same. I thought the party is starting to come back. My question is, can we please move a little bit to the right? Can you please find somebody to help you become a little bit more passionate? I love the fact that you're a lawyer. You come across as a lawyer. I'd like to see a little bit more passion from you. And can we get rid of momentum out of the party, please?
But, John, look, thank you very much.
He's an old-fashioned Labour.
No, John, I'm really glad you were there for the speech on Saturday, which was a speech about the health service and what we do about waiting lists, what the long-term prospects are. I want to move health from just curing and treating people to prevention. And obviously I had a lot to say about mental health. But John, what I think we need to do is we need to build a new Britain coming out of the pandemic. We need to harness that spirit of sort of togetherness that we've had in the last 2 years. And what I've proposed to the British people is there's a sort of contract between a Labour government and the public, a contract based on security, so people feel secure, in their own home, in their own job. Prosperity, so they feel they've got a job that is well paid, where they can live their life to the full, and respect for people, whoever they are, and whatever they do. So, and I should say, on the government side, the deal is to deliver that security, prosperity, and respect, but also to act with decency. And there's a major divide here. I think that principles in public life really matter. I think it matters whether you're honest, whether there's integrity, whether you're accountable, whether you show leadership. And I'm fed up, John, and here's some passion for it. I'm really fed up with people that said to me in the last 2 years, oh, you have to understand, Keir, that the Prime Minister's sort of dishonesty or not playing by the rules, it's baked in or priced in. I'm sorry, I'm different. It shouldn't be. So that's my basic. That's the contract I think we need with the British public.
Follow up quick.
I understand that. That's lovely. There's just Jeremy Corbyn says he's going to start a new party. I'm joyful at that because I'm happy he's clearing off and starting his own party. Do you feel threatened by that, or are we going to help him?
Oh, I don't feel threatened in the slightest by that. I don't know whether it's true or not. A lot of these stories go around. John, I've seen my job.
Isn't there a hard core that were Mr. Corbyn to start? I've got a note here. It could be the new Peace and Justice Party. Were he to go ahead with that, he could attract a lot of current Labour supporters, couldn't he, Sir Keir?
I think the vast majority of Labour supporters want to see a Labour government. It's that's the whole point in the Labour Party. And if you like, John, in 2020, when I took over the Labour Party, I had to do 3 things double quick. First was to recognise we lost really badly and to do something that political parties aren't very good at, which is don't blame the electorate if you lose that badly. Don't say we should have just shouted louder, you didn't hear us. Actually say we, the Labour Party, got it wrong, we got to change. And that's why I've changed the Labour Party. The next bit is to say this government isn't fit for purpose. I'm doing that now. I'm ably assisted by the Prime Minister, who's making it clear that he's not fit for purpose. The next bit, and this is 2022 for me, John, very much, is we have to show that if this government, the Johnson government, isn't up to it, then we are. It's why I had a reshuffle, put our top team out there, and why I'm making speeches about health and mental health to show what the alternative is.
Would you rather a wounded Boris Johnson clung on for 2 more years or whatever, and you fought him at a general election, rather than an invigorated Rishi, Liz, whoever it might be?
Look, first thing I should say is I'll take on whoever is leading them, and I don't really care. I think that it's in the national interest that Boris Johnson goes now.
Goes now?
And I'll tell you for why. And put the party politics to one side. He's lost all authority, and that matters, whichever party you're in. And we're still in the pandemic. It's very important that people behave in the way that we need them to behave, but he's lost the authority to ask people to do so. But even if you put that on one side, we've got an energy bill crisis. We've got waiting lists in our hospitals. We've got Russian troops on the border with Ukraine. There are big issues going on, and we've got a Prime Minister that is too weak to lead. He's lost his authority, and I feel that Britain is paralysed now by the weakness of the Prime Minister, and that's not in the national interest, whichever political party you're in.
Coming back to membership, you have one new member of whom I'm sure you're aware. You knew he was coming. This is just to play a little bit from a listener speaking to a podcast, Political Thinking, Gary Neville.
I think Labour, to be fair, I think they've improved in the last month. I think they have got stronger. I think, probably end of 2020, I thought Labour should have been a lot stronger. And I think Labour had them at that point. And I don't believe at that point, and I would be open with Keir about this, I don't think that he was strong enough at that point. He didn't have this. Now I think he realises he needs to take the gloves off. People would say, well, Keir Starmer, is he good enough to be the Labour leader? I think he has got integrity that is well above, and actually a competence that's well above Boris Johnson.
He makes it sound like he's talking about the Arsenal back four there. You're in the middle of it.
When he says there, he said, and I've been open with him about this, I can tell you, Nick, he was. we had a number of conversations.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah, I'm a big fan of his, by the way. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
And his analysis is fantastic.
And imagine, every year, Nick, there's an annual game of football between the politicians and the journalists. Yeah. So if Gary has now joined Team Labour, we've got in addition to a very important, powerful voice, I've now got a really good footballer that we can put out in that team.
Come on, you know I'm a journo. I've got to. How open was it? Come on, what did he say? I mean, bear in mind I've got a licence to protect, but how open was he to you?
Look, Gary thought I wasn't being strong enough. He thought that we should have voted against the government restrictions in the tier system. I didn't, and I didn't agree with the tier system, but it was all or nothing in those days. If you didn't vote for the restrictions, then there were no restrictions, and I didn't think that was the right thing. He thought differently, and we had an exchange. But I like, people get me wrong. Some Labour leaders like the warm bath of being in a hall full of Labour supporters who clap and cheer the whole time. I don't, because that's not actually helping anything. I like robust conversations. I actually really like conversations with people who don't vote Labour, because they're the best conversations for me. They're the people I've got to persuade. They're the people I've got to listen to. So warm bath of spending my time with Labour voters who just tell me everything's fine,
yes,
or the gritty conversations with people who say we've not got it quite right, I'll take the second any day.
One day, Gary Neville as a candidate, possible runner for Manchester Mayor. God, he brings Manchester Mayor.
Well, look,
if Andy Burnham went on to do something else, who knows what?
I think, Andy fancies himself as a footballer as well. Andy's a good, forward in any football game. So, if nothing else, I'm assembling a fine team.
But you'd be happy to see Mr Neville put forward as a candidate if the local Labour Party. Gary
should go as far as he wants to. I'm delighted that he wants to join Team Labour, and it's vindication, I think, that that we're changing the Labour Party, and now what I'm hearing more and more is people who want to be associated with us, want to join us, and that is a good thing.
There was a smile there. There's no smiles on our next caller, because as you've referenced already, Sir Keir, and it's being called about awful April when some of the bills come in, and that's giving a lot of concern to Annie in Carnforth, who's through now. Annie, you're through to Sir Keir. Go ahead. Good morning.
Good morning. My partner and I are both disabled pensioners, and we're housebound, so our heating's on all day from early morning till when we go to bed at night. And we're both really worried about the hike in gas bills by 50% in April, and about the cost of living crisis generally and all our bills going up. The government have suspended the triple lock on pensions this year. Two questions. Would Labour, if it was in power, keep the triple lock on pensions? And would you renationalise the utility companies, because the energy market is obviously completely dysfunctional at the moment? So many of them have gone bust.
Well, Annie, can I just start by saying I really understand, I can hear in your voice just how anxious you are, because this is going to be a really tough winter, and by the time April comes and bills go up again and taxes come in again for people, it's going to be really tough. We've got inflation going up, as everybody knows, food prices have gone up, fuel prices have gone up, and energy bills have gone up. Just taking the energy bills first, Annie, I don't know whether you saw that we put out a strong proposal last week through Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, and that was to have a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies in the North Sea. They've made more money than they expected to make, so we say a windfall tax on them, and to use that to cut the energy bills of yourself and other people by up to £200 for every household, up to £600 for those on low and medium income. So people often say to me, Annie, and quite rightly, say, you criticise the government all the time, what would you do about it? And so the answer is we'd cut those bills by up to £600 for those on low and medium incomes. And then the next question people ask me is, well, how would you pay for that? And the answer to that is a windfall tax on oil and gas in the North Sea. And Annie, this is one of the points I'm trying to make about Boris Johnson, because your anxiety, I think, is shared by millions of people across the country. And at the moment, we've got a Prime Minister who is out of action and unable even to engage in that question. And that's, why what's gone on with these parties is not just about the parties, it's actually about the lack of leadership from the Prime Minister.
Quick response from you, Annie.
Well, we use as far as the energy companies are concerned, we use the French company EDF. So any profits they make is going back to the French exchequer. Whereas if our utility companies were renationalised, then any profits would go back to the British exchequer. Surely that would be better.
Well, Annie,
Would you ever renationalise, Sir Keir?
Well, look, I'm not in favour of nationalisation. I mean, there's different ways of doing business, but the top-down version of nationalisation I don't think really works, and I'm not in favour of that. We may have to look at the models for ownership of energy companies, but the immediate
this
problem...
is a fair point. The money goes back to Paris, or goes back to France.
The immediate problem, Annie, is how do we get through the next 6 months, 9 months, 12 months for many people, and being hit by higher prices and by what will be, more taxes coming in April as well, because the government's hitting people with the national insurance rise. There'll be council tax rises. If people are on universal credit, they've just lost £1,000 a year. This is a real struggle for millions of people, Annie. And I'm really glad you called, because there's been so much focus on the parties, etc. But I think millions of people are in exactly the same place as you, which is really anxious about how they pay the bills.
Annie, thank you. Stay in touch. We'll be covering that story a lot, so please do stay in touch and perhaps call me again. Kieran in Durham is through now, though. Kieran, you're through to Sir Keir. Morning.
Morning, Keir.
Hi, Kieran.
I'd just like to ask, with regards to the events surrounding Barry Gardiner last week, what lessons can we learn from that, and do you plan to take any action centrally?
This is, just to remind everyone, this is a former senior Labour MP, Barry Gardiner, who accepted more than £400,000 in donations from so-called Chinese spy Christine Lee. I understand a total, the Labour Party, of around £600,000 is the figure I have here. Sir Keir.
Well, Kieran, I think the question you ask is, what are the lessons? The lessons are we've got to continue to be vigilant. Here was Christine Lee. The security and intelligence services have revealed what they know about her, and it's obvious that nobody should have anything to do with her. She had access, I think, to two previous prime ministers, Conservative prime ministers, and she was involved in Barry Gardiner's office and gave money to him.
425,000. Have you spoken to Mr. Gardiner about this?
I haven't. I mean, Barry has.
You haven't?
No, he's given an account and he has explained.
One of your colleagues takes £425,000 from a, quotes, Chinese spy, and you, as the boss, don't give him a phone call and ask, what the hell's going on here, Barry?
Well, he's explained his position and he's declared that money in accordance with the register. But there is a broader lesson for all of us here, which is to be vigilant about this, whichever political party we're in.
Jackie Smith, on an LBC podcast, of course, former Labour Home Secretary, says you should withdraw the whip from Mr. Gardiner. Sir Keir?
Well, I will wait to see what the facts are, what the findings are, etc. But at the moment, there's no suggestion that Barry Gardiner's done anything wrong.
And you won't be calling him?
Well, I probably will call him and talk to Barry Gardiner. There's no issue there.
No, but you won't call him about this?
Well...
I mean, if you're going to call him, you'd have called him straight afterwards, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I haven't spoken to him about this.
OK. Do you think the BBC is in any way biased? Are you in support of the idea of restricting the licence fee? Well, no, not actually, of actually giving no licence fee increase for 2 years. Sir Keir.
Nick, I think the BBC does a good job at holding us all to account, and they ask us all questions that are really tough, as you do to me, and quite right to. And what I just fear is going on here is that...
It's a dead cat, isn't it?
Yes, what happens is there's rule breaking, and then, this is typical of this Prime Minister, what do you do next? You then attack those that enforce the rules. Owen Paterson, what did the Prime Minister do? He attacked the rule enforcers, and then you attack those that hold us to account. I don't have any truck with that. Have I faced questions I'd rather not face? Of course I have. Have I then gone out and moaned about it and said the BBC or anybody else is biased? No, I haven't, because that's part and parcel of being a politician. You face the questions, whether you think they're fair or whether you don't think they're fair.
You don't think the licence fee should be held down?
I don't think you should. What is this? This is saying to the BBC, we don't like your coverage of us, and we're going to threaten you financially as a result. This is a very bad step in a democracy. Face the music. The government's got answers. Go out and give those answers to the BBC. But sometimes, I've heard the various introductions to Newsnight, etc. If there's a very bad week for the government, and last week was a very bad week for the government, then I'm afraid the headlines aren't going to be very nice. Equally, if I'm having a bad week, I will get tough questions, and quite right too. And Nick, you've put tough questions to me over the time I've known you. Would I rather not have to face those questions? Of course I'd rather not have to face them, but it's important that I do. It's important you put them to me. And I respect that, by the way.
One last question from me and one from a listener. I'll go very quickly. As we've referenced Newsnight, Wes Streeting, your senior colleague, says Kirsty Walk, one of the presenters, described Sue Gray, she is of course the person who will deliver the report on the Prime Minister in Affairs Number 10, quotes, as independent. This is incorrect. She's a civil servant who reports to her superiors. She's in an impossible position with an impossible task, but it is inaccurate to describe her as independent. So Wes Streeting doesn't see her as independent. Do you?
The first thing I should say, Nick, in full disclosure, I know Sue Gray, because I was Director of Public Prosecutions. She was a senior civil servant, so I know her personally. So let me just be clear
Is she as
about
formidable as everybody says?
She has got huge integrity and huge respect, and I don't think you'll meet anybody who has ever worked with her who would say otherwise. So that is a very good thing. But, and this isn't a but in relation to Sue, I am as sure as I can be that what she will do is set out the facts. So she will say, these are the facts as I found them to be, having interviewed people, looked at various documents. I think it's extremely unlikely that she's going to go on and say, and that amounts to breach of the law.
She's not a judge.
She will say, I'm not a judge, that isn't my job. So and this is why let's wait for the Sue Gray report. OK up to a point, but she's only I think, will only establish the facts, and then it'll be for others to say, well, does that breach the law or not?
So your colleague Wes wasn't implying that she's in any way biased with this tweet?
No, he wasn't. But it is... There's an interesting issue here, because, of course, Sue Gray's a civil servant, answers ultimately through to the Prime Minister.
But will have done under all colours.
I get that. This isn't a criticism.
Right.
So civil servants, in the end, senior civil servants, in the end, answerable to the Prime Minister, and she's in the position of trying to establish the facts in relation to the Prime Minister. The problem we've got, Nick, is that we've got a system that was set up before we had a Prime Minister like Boris Johnson, and when it was assumed that Prime Ministers would behave in a particular way. And along comes someone who sort of breaks the rules, rips the rules up, and that is testing the arrangements. And we may have to come back to this.
So you don't think Sue Gray report is the end of it, I sense?
No, I don't.
It almost needs then a judge or something, or the Met or somebody to get involved after Sue Gray.
Do you know what? I think it's gone. I think it's already. I don't think the public are waiting for the Sue Gray report. I think they've made their mind up.
You don't need someone to tell you whether you attended a party. Whether I've left a party, sometimes I need help with that. Or when.
Well, you had the Prime Minister still insisted he didn't know whether he was at the party, and Sue Gray was going to have to tell him. I was going to tease him about how hammered he may have been at the party, but no, I actually think that we all are waiting for the Sue Gray report. I think the public's made its own mind up. There's anger at the Prime Minister. There's actually ridicule. People are they're joking about it. And once the country is no longer laughing with you, they're laughing at you. You really are in a bad place as a Prime Minister.
Can I ask you to take one last question, if I hope I don't...
Yeah,
Matthew's been hanging on forever. Matthew at Heathrow, if I can ask you to put your question in a succinct sentence, sir, you're the last one. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, hi, Sir Keir.
Hi, Matthew.
Do you agree with the majority of LBC callers that Prince Harry should be given royal protection when in the UK, and who should be paying for it?
And just to sum this up, it is that only when the Prince hopefully comes here to celebrate his grandmother's Jubilee, he has offered to pay for the security, but there are many former senior police officers who say, hang on, the Met is not like an agency that you just hire bodyguards. It rather demeans the Met and those officers. Sir Keir?
I certainly agree with the last point, that the Met isn't some sort of agency that anybody can say, well, I can pay for it. On the other hand, look, I don't know the full details of this. It is a serious situation where a member of the royal family is going to be in the UK and may be at risk. And I don't think anybody would want to see that. And therefore, I hope that this can be resolved in a way which provides the protection that is needed. Obviously, there's the offer to pay for it. I can see the argument that That in itself shouldn't determine this. But, you know...
The point listeners made is the DPG, as if it was once called, another foreign member of a foreign royal family or a president, or would actually be afforded that level of security by the Met anyway. Why does Harry not come into that realm, is what listeners were saying.
I think that may, in the end, I suspect this will turn on the risk assessment that the Met and the Home Office make independently, as they always do, and they do a really good job. And so I think it can be resolved. I hope it can be resolved, because in the end, we do want to ensure the safety of the royal family.
Thanks for your time and for your candour. Keep using that hand sanitizer, won't you? Let's try and get together in February. I'm never too sure. Sir Keir Starmer appearing here on LBC for Cool Keir. Thanks, Keir. 9:35, LBC headlines.
Sir Keir Starmer has insisted on LBC that drinking beer with his staff was not a breach of COVID rules. The Labour leader has declined to apologise over a photo of him at a constituency office ahead of last May's election. He says that's a million miles away from the picture of the Prime Minister and his staff enjoying drinks in the No. 10 garden. The FBI is working with authorities in the UK over Saturday's